Hello, my name is Rose Riley, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. Welcome to our online candidate forum for the November 5th general election. The League is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that promotes voter education and participation, and we host candidate forums to help voters make informed choices. Now, let's hear from the candidates.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Smerick, and I will moderate the forum tonight. It's my honor to introduce the candidates running in the November general election for the Michigan House of Representatives, District 32. Martin Church, who's the Republican, Jimmy Wilson Jr., who's the Democrat, and Ryan Sample of the Green Party. And a late note that just developed, Mr. Ryan Sample of the Green Party was invited and scheduled and notified several times to participate this evening, but he found he was unable to attend. So thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum. We're now ready for the opening statement. Mr. Church, may we have your opening statement?
Yes, I'm Martin Church. I'm running for the 32nd House seat to represent the city of Ypsilanti and the township of Ypsilanti. I'm running on the Republican ticket on a belief that the government is run by the people, not by politicians. I am not a politician, never claimed to be, and I run as such. If you're looking for somebody different, I guess I'm more conservative, and I look for other ways of doing it than through the government.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And now we're ready for your opening statement, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Jimmy Wilson Jr. I'm the current state representative here in the 32nd District, running for re-election this year. And I think that most of the residents here in House District 32, which covers the city of Ypsilanti, Ypsilanti Township, and parts of Superior and Pittsfield Township, can agree that when we can bring in over $100 million in funding from the state into our district, something that's unheard of. I think that it's good to have continuity and continue to support the endeavors of our current electeds. They were able to secure these funding. It's very important that we look at folks and people's background, being able to work with different individuals from every level of government, as well as reaching across the aisle. And I've demonstrated that over the past 2 years of my term. Looking forward to the rest of this forum as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And thank you, candidates. And now we're going to the questions. We'll start with Mr. Wilson with the first question. The Michigan legislature could not agree this year on renewal of the SOAR fund. That's SOAR, which stands for the Michigan Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve, which supports business attraction to the state. Some detractors criticize the effectiveness of the SOAR grants. What is your philosophy regarding use of taxpayer funds to create jobs? And should such spending focus on encouraging technology and innovation, or instead focus on manufacturing jobs?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My philosophy on the SOAR fund, I think it doesn't have to be that we have to pick one endeavor. We don't have to do manufacturing or technology. I think we can do both. And I think we've demonstrated that with some of the projects that we were able to secure and bring into the state of Michigan. In some of these cases, these companies only had a few options where it could be overseas or down south or out west, but they chose Michigan because we were able to negotiate and put provisions in place, safeguards, so to speak, that if you're going to receive public dollars, you need to meet a lot of different benchmarks to be able to receive those dollars. The way it actually works, they actually have to do the performance first, and then they receive the finances on the back end. So there was a project where the company decided to scale back on how many jobs. So that also means that the state of Michigan is going to scale back on how many public dollars they're going to actually get. And so I think those are good safeguards in place. But as far as the SOAR reform, which we're hoping that we can get done here in the next few months, we can still put public dollars towards attracting big companies to come in with good paying jobs. But we also need to use some of those funds to really expand our infrastructure, whether that be for public transit or whether that be for upgrading our current infrastructure, and also money into housing. And that's actually the full SOAR reform that we're trying to complete, that hasn't quite made it over the finish line. But I think if we can get it done before the end of the year, we can really put money into housing, transit, and also attraction of good paying jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And Mr. Church, same question to you, sir.
My basic philosophy is let's lower the tax rates all around. Remember, all those dollars that we're talking about getting from the feds came from us, the taxpayers. We are playing games with our money. We worked our tails off to earn the money, only to have the government come along and say, we're going to take it. Let's reduce all of our taxes down, reduce the regulations, and let's let competition drive it, not our dollars. All we're doing is picking and choosing which companies we're going to allow in. And we're knocking out the small businessman, the guy with 1 or 2 employees who could do the job of 35 to 40. We've got to rechange how we think. And that's our problem. We are too busy taxing to try to give benefits to the big names. Let's let individuals in the community solve the issues. Stop taxing us, give the money back to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Church. Now to the next question. And Mr. Wilson, that next question starts with you, sir. Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court substantially limited the federal EPA's, Environmental Protection Agency's, power to protect wetlands, leaving most protection efforts to the states. Michigan has a wetlands protection law, but it requires continual funding and other support from the legislature. What specific additional steps, if any, do you think are needed to protect Michigan wetlands?
Well, I am definitely a big proponent for a piece of legislation that I've co-sponsored around making sure that if companies are polluting, that they are paying. And a lot of times when we're talking about our wetlands, a lot of times we have companies that over the years have polluted our environment, our land, and some of our wetlands. And we actually need to start putting penalties in place for companies that are polluting and not taking care of what they have done. We are always getting dollars from our taxpayers, and we have to change that. It should not come from the taxpayers. It should actually come from these companies that are doing that. And so that's a big piece of legislation, polluter pay, that I support. And I believe there's other initiatives that we can support in regards to our wetlands. We passed big legislation last year in regards to the Clean Energy and Jobs Act, where we're going to get to 100% clean energy by 2040. And this is all a part of our environmental plan that has been led by our governor, Gretchen Whitmer. And so all these things together, because it won't be any one piece of legislation that gets things done, we need to attack it from different angles, make sure we're holding companies accountable, but also protecting as much as we can of our environment and our wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. So
Okay.
Same question to you, sir.
Yeah, again, we have to change our regulations. One, define what is a wetland. Right now, almost anything that holds a body of water could be considered a wetland, including your ditch, the little puddle that's in your backyard. We need firm guidelines on what is a wetland. Secondly, yes, hold those businesses or individuals responsible for the damage that they're doing, but it takes too long. We need clear, precise laws in place to do the work. We make too many exemptions. We have to redefine it. rewrite the laws so that it's clear of what we want and reduce the regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And you're the first one on the next question, which is, as a result of a recent Michigan Supreme Court decision, Michigan minimum wage rates will increase next year. All employees will be eligible for paid sick days, and the separate minimum wage for tipped workers will be phased out. Michigan employer groups are lobbying the legislature to roll back these changes. What, if anything, should the legislature do?
I'm not a big fan of what the Supreme Court ruled. It's going to kill our businesses. Small businesses can't afford it. The only ones that can afford it is big companies like Walmart, Applebee's, and even they are going to be closing down. The tip workers are going to be losing because they're not going to receive tips like they used to. My sister used to work as a waitress. I worked at minimum wage. I would work for $3 an hour. Now, this is a few years ago. But she would bring home for the same number of hours almost $200 in tipped wages. Now, I'm not saying she didn't earn it, because she did. But if she was working at minimum wage, she would never have made that amount. You need to be rewarded for what you earn. And unfortunately, the increase in minimum wage means that those people who work a long period of time, such as my wife working at U of M, now is being placed back at minimum wage. She will not see an increase equivalent to what the minimum wage workers are getting.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And Mr. Wilson, same question to you, sir.
All right, thank you for that question. And yes, Supreme Court decision that happened over the summer, I believe in July. And this has been a really big, important issue around the state. A lot of business owners, small business owners are very concerned about this, as well as workers and labor unions as well. And I think that after meeting with a lot of our business owners here in District 32, a lot of them have explained and demonstrated, even using data, on how tight their profit margins are and how this could potentially hurt their business models. And so I am a big proponent of compromise, and I believe that we should reevaluate the law that was put in place previously back in 2018, 2019, and see if there is some wiggle room to work with our businesses, as well as working with the workers themselves, because there's actually a lot of wait staff who actually can appreciate what the Supreme Court decided. I will make mention that in other states, when this was done, waitresses, wait staff, workers that are tipped workers, they actually did not see a decrease in their pay and a decrease in the tips. The average percentage of tips was still at roughly about 16 to 18% in other states that this law or this type of legislation passed. And so I believe that our workers will still maintain what they currently get, but we do need to take the concerns of our business owners seriously and see if we can work with them to change or alter what was put in place years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And the next question goes also to you, sir. It relates to agriculture in Michigan. Agriculture plays a large role in the economy of your House district, District 32. How can the legislature support the agriculture industry to the benefit of Michigan citizens?
Thank you for that question. And here in the in District 32, the Ypsilanti area, we have seen an insurgence of urban farming that has taken place here in our district. And I think that if we can continue to support farming for urban areas like Ypsilanti, but also making sure that we understand that our main industry here in Michigan is agriculture. When you look at throughout the entire state, we have to take it seriously on making sure our farmers are taken care of and making sure that there are incentives in place that they can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Church, same question to you, sir.
Yes, as when it comes to agriculture, not only do we need a place to grow things, we also need a place to sell them. And unfortunately, our federal and state laws, which unfortunately the federals I can't do much about, we have made it so that our farmers can't compete. We can grow the crops, but the big distribution centers are closed to them. Such as the blueberry farmers right now have a bumper crop of blueberries, but they can't get them to the market. They're about to take a huge loss because the local distributors, such as Kroger's, Walmart, will not handle Michigan products. We need to change that. We need to make it so that Michigan products show up in Michigan stores and then spread out from there. And part of that has to do with our rules and regulations. We need to cut them.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And you get the first one on the next question. Do you believe Michigan elections are free and fair? If not, what steps are needed to ensure that they are?
This is a real fun, interesting question. The question is, free? Yes. Well, no, they're not free because it costs us money. Such as even this campaign alone. Now I'm raising no funds. Mr. Wilson, I haven't looked at his latest budget yet, but I'm pretty sure it's up there. Other campaigns, it's costing close to $100,000 depending on the election. It's not free. Fair, again, we have to rely on the local media. And unfortunately, our local media has not paid attention to the 32nd district. I have not seen anybody from Ann Arbor News covering either the primaries or even this general election of the 32nd district. Other districts they're covering, but it's one-sided. Unfortunately for the conservatives, we're not getting the word out. We don't own a newspaper, a TV station, so it's difficult to get the word out. But I'm seeing a ton of money being spent by both parties on their campaigns. Unfortunately for our district, the money is not there. So fair and free is depending upon how you look at it. I'm not going to say that there was anything going on. Is there questions? Yes, and we should be addressing them. Unfortunately, nobody will look at it. Everybody says that past elections have had problems, but we are not honestly looking at it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And Mr. Wilson, same question to you, sir.
Thank you. Great question. And I think this is very fitting for the League of Women Voters who care a lot about elections, election information, election integrity, and all of the things that go along with elections. And I believe that we do have free and fair elections. We have had many audits here in the state of Michigan that have passed with flying colors, thanks to our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. However, there's legislation that we were able to pass over the past year and a half to codifying automatic registration for voters when they are dealing with the Secretary of State's offices. We've also made sure that folks who are coming out of incarceration are also automatically registered to vote. We've also made sure that when you want to give rides to polls, there's no penalties in place like there were before. And like you see some places down south that are trying to penalize people from getting people to the polls. Even legislation around making sure that if there's a line, you can give water or food to people who are standing in line who are trying to vote. And so these are just some other small things, but very important because we want to make sure that we are being inclusive for those who are legally able to vote and making sure that we have integrity in our elections. And the final thing I'll mention, something that we passed actually very recently as of about 2 weeks ago, is that we made sure that the Board of Canvassers, when they are certifying the votes, they have to certify the vote based on the actual vote count. They don't get opinions about the election, they have to look at the numbers, look at the data, and whichever candidates have won based on the numbers, they have to certify that election. And so now we have that in place. You would think that that would have already been something that was just known. However, we've seen in the past where that was not always the case. So now we have that in place, and those who don't, there will be penalties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And this will be now, gentlemen, our last question for today's forum. And Mr. Wilson, you start off with this one. This one relates to solar power in Michigan. The website of Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy states that Michigan does not have the laws necessary to permit individuals, like renters, to form a community-based solar electric system and obtain energy through that system. Do you favor such legislation? Why or why not?
Yes, I do favor that legislation. We actually have colleagues who have introduced that legislation, and I have co-sponsored community solar. I think that it really gives power back to the people to do community solar. It will help bring their rates down because we know that some of our utilities are constantly trying to raise the rates on our residents, and people are tired of that. And so I do support legislation like that. And I also support public power, where municipalities can take back their power if they want. And so these are just some initiatives I think can actually help our residents lower rates and kind of feel like they're empowered in some of these utilities that seem to have monopolies. And so we have to make sure that we're showing our residents as elected officials that we understand their concerns. We already know costs are up in a variety of different ways. And so energy rates have to come down, and community solar can be one of those answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And Mr. Church, same question to you, sir.
Okay, now I have not read the legislation, so I can't speak on that. As far as renters installing solar panels, I think it's got to be in cooperation with the owner. I've watched solar panels go up and down on houses and the damage done to them. If you own something, your renter should not be able to put up something on top of the roof without your approval. As far as solar goes on a public area, it's not going to meet our needs. Personally, I would rather see us start installing nuclear and also start bringing more companies in who will supply power. Let municipalities start generating power like they used to. Wyandotte used to have a fantastic energy production system. They never relied on DTE for anything. Now we're stuck with two powerhouses and it's a monopoly. There's no competition. I say let's let nuclear in. Bring in some small mini nuclear plants run by local municipalities and see if we can solve our energy problems that way. Let's stop trying to give China access to our energy grid. Solar panels are all manufactured in China. We need to stop that. So I'm going to let it go at that.
Thank you, Mr. Church, and thank you, candidates, for those excellent answers. We're now ready for the closing statements. So may we begin with your closing statement, Mr. Church?
Okay. My closing statement is essentially, we should not be looking to the government. Our problems in our communities are communion-based. We need to start having a relationship with our families, with our faith systems, with our gods, not looking to the government to solve everything. This country was never meant to have massive government. It was designed to have things small and local. Let's bring it back to the local community, get the government out of our hairs, and solve things locally. If you want to solve the problems, let's start at the local family. Let's get the families back together. A husband and wife with their kids is the basis of a family, not what we're doing now. We're destroying the family. And so that's the solution. Reduce taxes and bring the families together. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Church. And Mr. Wilson, may we have your closing statement, sir? And you need to unmute. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for putting on this forum once again. My closing statement is that if you have been paying attention to the Michigan legislature over the past 18 months, and you care about making sure that we have repealed the pension tax off of our seniors, if you care about how we have put back in place prevailing wage for our construction workers, if you care about repealing the so-called right to work law that really hurt our unions, if you really care about the common sense gun legislation that we passed in regards to universal background checks, safe storage laws, red flag laws, if you care about how we've passed legislation to support our teachers, giving them their bargaining power back at the bargaining table in regards to class sizes and healthcare costs and evaluations, I believe that I would be a great candidate for you to highly consider in the upcoming November election as I'm running for re-election as your state representative, including all of those dollars that I talked about at the beginning that we were able to get into our district for a variety of different purposes in regards to infrastructure and higher education and K-12 funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, and thank you, candidates, for participating in this valuable session.
The League thanks the candidates and volunteers who participated in today's forum and the community members who submitted questions. Please urge others to view our forums. And most importantly, please vote in the November 5th general election, either by absentee ballot or in person.